Stadium may be the craziest thing that Overwatch has ever put out. Not only does it have the potential for third person, which is Rivals-esque, but there's also an entirely new system of how the gameplay functions, both from a system standpoint, perk system, gameplay standpoint, hero system, and even there's new maps that are unique to Stadium. All that being said, is it actually fun? What do you need to know actually getting into the gameplay? And do you have any tips about how to execute on these things better? All these things will be coming out at the start of season 16. That's going to be this Tuesday. A lot of my information today is going to be coming from 4 news releases from Blizzard discussing the information about Stadium from 2.5 days of actually practicing and playtesting Stadium. And then this past Thursday, I had the opportunity to actually playtest Stadium with both Aaron Keller, Karq, Flats, and Dylan Snyder, the senior designer of Stadium. There's a lot of information from that playtest with Aaron Keller and Dylan. They were very upfront and obviously a lot of fun to play with as well. So I'll try to remember to link that in the description so that you guys can check that out and go over those things, as well as the additional Blizzard news releases. Some of the insight about how the rank system works also came from some of Gavin Winter's comments on Tuesday's stream. He was hanging out in my Twitch chat answering a lot of questions about Stadium. So we had a lot of insight here, and I'm going to try to encapsulate all of that into one space. And obviously there is a lot of information here, so if I don't get onto every single detail and I miss a couple of details, just let me know in the comments. Number one, there is going to be a plan for new content every season. Aaron Keller hinted at a potential director's take or a roadmap about what's going to be moving forward with the Stadium, but it's something they're going to be actively developing, even at the point of having patch notes basically every single patch, and patch notes that are unique to Stadium. He hinted at as well early on they're going to be putting a lot of extra emphasis on fixing any issues or maybe bringing in some new shiny things, because it is a very important thing that they want to succeed early on. So they might front load a lot of that development to make sure that people are getting hooked on the game mode. They have a mostly separate development team for this as opposed to the team that's working on the base game. So there's a lot of concerns about whether they're going to be able to balance and develop this and the base game at the same time. But the reality is that there's actually kind of 2 different development teams all under Team 4 developing. The plan is to trickle heroes out one at a time, and I suspiciously think that they're prioritizing on characters that have high pick rates or are very popular. For example, you're going to see a lot of Mercy, Moira, and Orisa, where the question is why were these characters chosen? My suspicion is that either they're just very popular, have very high pick rates across all ranks. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Last thing that may be factored into which heroes are being picked is the ease of those heroes kits being implemented in the Stadium. For example, I don't think Mei is necessarily the most popular character, but her kit has so much going on that there's a lot of ways to creatively and uniquely interpret that in the MOBA-esque format. For third person or first person, it is an option that you can choose, and you can choose it for each character. The only downside is that you can't pivot it in game. So it is something that you have to kind of choose and lock in. And I believe you can actually choose which shoulder you look over. So if you're preferring left or right shoulder, you can choose whatever side that you'd like. I don't have any information about crossplay. There currently is no plan for hero bans, but that might change depending on how many heroes are implemented. The plan is to implement all of the Overwatch heroes eventually, and it aims to feel, in my opinion, to be a more chaotic, fun, and slightly unbalanced Rivals-esque play with friends, not MOBA exactly, Overwatch experience with a lot of extra spice. I know that this thing looks a lot like Rivals, and it can function a lot like Rivals in terms of just raw trades and raw explosive pressure, but it really still feels like Overwatch heroes, just kind of cooked up to the gills a lot. And it is really not a MOBA in how it functions. There's no laning phase, there's no bots to farm. The only thing that's MOBA-esque is the buy phase at the start, and that's more about making your hero feel more like Overwatch, maybe in more unique ways. If you're a big MOBAs fan, you might like aspects of this, but this is really more for Overwatch players that want to dabble in MOBAs rather than MOBA fans that want to dabble in Overwatch. But of course, your mileage may vary. The system itself is competitive only, but the game itself is not super competitive. The game itself doesn't feel immediately super perfectly balanced right now. There is progressive ranking. We'll talk about what that is and why that's important later on. And it feels pretty silly in a good way. It's not supposed to be, nor should it be tried to be solved immediately, although I'm sure it will be. As I mentioned earlier, they're planning on a lot of aggressive early patches, a lot of development. This thing has been in development, according to Aaron Keller, for several years. I know for me personally that I heard about the Stadium play test actually while Rivals was still in beta. In addition to that, they are going to be working on trying to get this mode into custom games as soon as possible. So if you don't want to play ranked and just want to do maybe some pickup games, some custom games with friends, they're going to try to work towards that. And if you didn't catch it earlier, they are planning on including every hero eventually. I think the progressive system will probably again be based off of pick rates and the hero's popularity. Next up, let's talk about the ranking system. system here. So the ranking system looks similar to Overwatch with different monikers and different logos, starting from rookie going all the way to legend. And the key thing that this is a progressive ranking system similar to Marvel Rivals, the thing that I really don't like. But this one I have less of an issue with, not only because it's not included in the base game and it's in the more silly, fun, casual. When I say casual, let me clarify here. It's not that this game doesn't have depth. It's just not intended to be solved and perfectly balanced. So when I say casual, I don't mean that it's easy or simple. I just mean that it's not necessarily something that you should go in and sweat and try hard. I think if you do that, you're going to compromise sort of what this game was designed for. So it's not an insult. I really like Stadium and I love casual games in that standpoint. So now that being said, it's a progressive ranking system for a mode that's not intended to be taken quite as seriously as the base game. There's no loss of rank in both rookie and novice. So eventually you're going to climb out of novice no matter how bad you are. And then for the next two tiers, which are contender and elite, equivalent of like basically gold and plat, you win more than you lose. So the reality is that if you play enough of this mode, unless you're a lower mid bronze player, you're likely going to be able to climb into elite. What this means is that we're going to see the bell curve kind of shift to the right, I guess here. So you're going to see fewer silver and gold players in contender and elite, and most of those are going to be kind of trickling contender elite into the next rank, and the high rank players are going to be more compressed into the top 3 ranks. Now I heard from Gavin Winter, the systems designer for Overwatch, in the chat that they're also doing matchmaking based off of MMR, not rank, he believes. So what this means is that you might have really wide rank matches where the actual skill of the players is really tight. I thought that was kind of strange and honestly kind of good to hear, but obviously we'll just have to wait and see. Also worth pointing out a couple of details here. It is role queue. It is 5v5. I don't know if there's any plans for 66. I think 66 could be a little bit extra chaotic, so we'd have to wait and see. The plan is to reset the rank every season to encourage progression, to encourage engagement. There are no grouping restrictions for any rank, and there will be a lot of titles, skins, etc. rewards from that sort of progression, and some of them actually look pretty decent. Overall, this feels like Overwatch buying into a little bit of the progressive ranking system, but being a lot more upfront and honest about it. They are honest exactly about when and where the ranking system works, and in theory maintaining some sort of competitive integrity more so than some of the other titles that I've been critical of. As long as this sort of stuff stays within Stadium, I don't mind it. Next, let's focus on the system of like how the game actually works. So it is the best of 7 with a mercy rule if you are 3-0 and winning by a lot of money. This money is farmed by actually doing damage, healing, damage boosting. I think it's objective. I'm honestly not too sure. That part of my testing wasn't complete. Ultimately, you can win by 3-0 by if you're winning by a lot of cash, and then otherwise you can win by a best of 7, so first to 4. There's a lot of game modes in here. Push, control, clash makes a comeback, and they're really, really brief game modes. So basically just one control point. Just push the robot 40 meters, or just win 2 clash points. And honestly, it functions pretty well. I wasn't even mad to see Clash make a comeback because a lot of the things that I was frustrated about with Clash, because it happens in such a brief instance, it actually felt okay, and the maps are beautiful. There's even a couple of unique maps for these game modes that are unique to Stadium, and they honestly look great. Currently right now, as mentioned before, there are limited heroes in the game mode, so you can only choose the heroes that are available, and you cannot swap at all for the rest of the game. The enemy team can't see what you pick until you've already locked into your heroes, but you can also see what powers they've picked in once they've locked in too. This allows for some sort of counter swapping around different builds and rather than different heroes. You can also sell stuff that you have built, the powers that you've accumulated, if you want to change up your build, and you have the opportunity to do so at the start of nearly every round, up to 7 rounds. Now, it's worth pointing that there are hero-specific powers that you select that you can only get 4 times for the entire game, and these you cannot sell. So once you choose them, you are locked in for the rest of the game. That being said, the vast majority of your expression can be quickly adjusted at the start of every round, and right now there's no sell penalties. You can literally rinse and repeat, start your entire build all over again with no cost penalty whatsoever. This means there's so much flexibility with how you can build, and you can honestly pivot things immediately from the start. There's good early game builds, good mid game builds, and good late game builds, and there's no penalty for you to quickly pivot from one to the next, or even just pivot your late game build to something entirely different. I will say that for strategy, it's often better to max out the full 6 unique powers before setting up for something big and juicy, but honestly, you do whatever you want. There are a lot of unique perks to each hero, so there are unique powers that you can't swap out, as I mentioned, but there are also unique perks within survival, ability, and weapon, the 3 different categories that are unique to the character that you're playing too. Most of them, however, are shared throughout all the cast. There's also a bounty catch-up system, which allows you to accumulate more cash for eliminating certain enemies if they're ahead. This allows the cash system to be relatively even, and I saw very few mercy rule games throughout the system, which was honestly kind of nice to see. You also gain 1 health per 500 cash used, and apparently tanks gain speed and strength based off the cash that they gain, but there wasn't a lot of clarification in the Blizzard news about what that actually means. Hopefully we'll get more info on that later. You can also check what your teammates are using in the menu, not during the army, but afterwards, so you can kind of learn to counter build and complement the things that they're doing. And during my playtest with Aaron Keller, Flats asked if there was a way to share builds similar to Deadlock, and they basically said, that's coming, but we can't say it because it's Corpo. So they basically hinted that that's definitely looking to come, and it would be very cool for the game, and it's definitely not coming in the future, you know, NDA, fingers crossed. But yeah, I mean, I think the plan here was that it was hinted that they're going to have a workshop code system where you can share your build code and that other people can utilize those codes as well. But it's worth mentioning as well, if you're completely lost, there are some suggested builds from the game itself about things that you can start with. So if you want a little bit of hand holding, that's there too. Last little thing here on the micro before we move on to advice, the ability weapon lifesteal. There's a lot of terminology that can be a little bit vague. I believe allies is also referring to yourself when it comes to the power text. Ability weapon lifesteal, these are new concepts as well. Essentially, it means that if your ability does damage, if your weapon does damage, then you generate health as a result. There's a lot of little terms that are going to take a little bit of getting used to, but generally you kind of have to look at this and be like, okay, does my character do damage with their ability? Do they do healing with their ability? Do they do damage with their weapon? And then decide if you want lifesteal or ability power. Keep in mind, ability power applies to both the damage and the healing of your abilities. So there's a lot of little screwy details that you're going to have to figure out on your own. But honestly, once I got a little bit more in the hang of it, I didn't have too much of a problem with it. It's just the first couple of games going to be a little bit overwhelming. I think for me, I generally try to play a character 2 or 3 times in a row, so I wasn't quite so overwhelmed by the second and third time, and I could focus more on kind of expressing myself creatively and trying new things. Now, kind of off that point, let's move into some advice about how you should actually play this mode. And this is going to be focused mostly on enjoying the process and not necessarily min-maxing your competitive strategy, although there'll be a little bit of that. As I said, I really encourage you to focus on fun, silly first, then a proper build with cohesion afterwards, and experiment often. You can counterpick if it's really necessary. The most fun that I had doing this was not counterpicking, but focusing exclusively on one goofy idea. A buddy of mine helped me to do a Rhine movement speed build where I was just blazing around the battlefield, and even when we were losing, it was still a lot of fun. The most fun I think I had total in this game mode was during that play test at the end. I was playing the Flats and Karq afterwards, and I did a soldier heal station damage build that somebody had hinted at, I think Karq, and I was able to find out a good way to increase my sprint speed so that I was basically unkillable, and then regenerate HP, and then have permanent heal station, and then buff the damage so it was like 80 DOT, and I was just running into it was amazing. It was the funniest thing I've seen in my entire life, and it was amazing. And again, that was what Stadium really brought to me. If I was playing Overwatch, but basically just playing Overwatch with perks and more perks, it was fun, but I think I just preferred the base game. But as soon as I started to get really, really silly with it, all of a sudden I realized that, oh my gosh, this is actually what the game mode is intended to be. I had another build where it was basically Juno with infinite torpedoes, and the dopamine was just insane. I had like 3,000 damage / healing in like 30 seconds. I built my ultimate basically instantly. It was phenomenal. It's also worth to adjust playstyles and picks if you're getting countered. I had a really bad experience with this one. We'll talk more about it later, playing Reinhardt into Orisa with full CC build, and Ana with a full CC build, and a Cassie with a full CC build. And I realized that, man, I should probably just pin backline and fly and then flank. But I kind of realized that too late. And I also didn't know that there were perks that could help with CC duration and cleansing and so on. So due to my ignorance, that was pretty bad. But even without the ignorance, it was pretty bad. So I think you're definitely going to have to adjust playstyle picks if you're getting quote unquote countered or focused down. So hey, here we go again. And then there's going to be 6 specific powers that you can buy and sell and slop in easy ones, and then medium ones, and then really strong ones depending on your build. And I do think it's generally more resource efficient to max those 6 out first before you save out for anything super expensive. But obviously it depends on the build, and it's totally fine to pivot builds aggressively too. I think the key thing is that you can sell so much of your crap early and late that it really doesn't matter what build you chose early and mid game. You can completely pivot it if you want to. So if you're playing for, like, let's say that soldier heal station build that I wanted to go for, the only really important thing were my specific hero powers that I couldn't sell out. Everything else I could just build. I actually built for really high damage and flank damage early on because that helped me to farm up earlier, and some of the things that would have been good for the heal station leech build just didn't help until I was actually at that level at like round 5 or round 6. So late game builds generally don't scale very well early on, so you kind of want to go in a different direction early and then pivot to that build later. And also keep in mind, not all powers are created equal. Not only are they created for all characters, I also think some of the powers are just kind of bad, but I think you'll figure out which one of those are. The game fundamentals of how the game functions are kind of the same: ult, space, cooldowns, angles, mechanics, all that kind of stuff. It could just be a bit more sustaining with some obvious build exceptions where there's a ton of damage, but for the most part, things definitely drag out a little bit longer, and that's by design. One of the criticisms I had of Rivals as a competitive game was how things drag out and how that was by design, but Stadiums tends to do so in that level, but does so almost self-aware, like this is supposed to be kind of silly, this is supposed to be sustaining, and if you really want to go high damage, you could do so. So this is going to be them tickling with that Rivals sustain, dopamine, longer fights, longer engagements, more damage, more healing, infinite torpedoes with Juno, as I mentioned earlier, right? It's fun to do that in occasion, and honestly, for some people that like that sort of gameplay loop with Rivals, you're probably going to be more likely to find it in this stadium mode than you are with the base game. Couple of tips here: bounties aren't necessarily a swap from what you normally do, so remember the extra cash that you can get from an enemy, it's at the top of your screen if you are losing. That I wouldn't necessarily change how you'd play. It's more of a reward if you do win a fight, you get extra cash, because I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to kill that person if it's going to mean that you lose the fight. And as always, don't save ultimates. This game modes happen so quickly, so oftentimes you may only have one, at most two ultimates depending on your build, so don't save ultimates. If the fight's winnable, use the ult. Finally here, let's talk a little bit about criticisms, and these are going to be a little bit more gentle because I don't think this game mode is trying necessarily to be a sweaty try-hard game mode, so I'm going to try to critique the things based off of what it's trying to be, which is more Rivals-esque, more silly, more fun. And no matter how long this game mode has been in development, even if it is for a couple of years, it definitely has a spirit of silliness, engagement, and just creativity that we're going to try to judge it based off of those metrics. Number one, I think the gameplay downtime ratio can feel a little bit low. There is a long armory phase, which is really appreciated, especially early on, because I'm just completely overwhelmed. I don't know what to pick. But as you get better at the system, you start to realize that there's a lot of time where you just kind of sit and waiting. And because the rounds end so quickly, because it's just capture the point once and the timer is already ticking, there's no 3-round cost. Oftentimes it feels like the gameplay is of secondary focus as to actually building for the gameplay. Maybe there could be an option to team vote to end the armory phase for both teams, but as it is right now, I don't think the gameplay to downtime ratio really works out that well for me. Obviously, unbalanced fun can have its limits. Like, let's be honest here. There were a lot of high highs in this game mode. There were a lot of low lows, and that was something that I knew going into it, but you're going to need to know going in as well. As I said earlier, that Reinhardt versus Orisa match was honestly maybe one of the worst Overwatch matches I've played in like a year in terms of how fun it was. I was playing versus AoE on a sleep, so that if she slept somebody else around me, I got slept through my shield. Raid boss Orisa. Orisa's just the absolute worst. We'll talk about that in a little bit. There are certain matchups that were just absolutely horrendous in terms of matchups. Just not fun to play versus at all. Unkillable characters that kill you with one shot across the map. That's kind of how the experience is supposed to go. Now, you should be trying to be one of those things yourself, but ultimately, go in, don't take the game too seriously. Don't try to min-max it immediately. If something bad happens, try to make it a silly moment for you where you pivot your build and try something new, trying a completely different experience. The way that we were actually able to beat a raid boss Orisa, I think we actually reverse swept 3-0 to 4-3, is I typed in team chat in a rare Spilo coaches the lobby moment as like, do not shoot the Orisa, whatever you do. Because she actually had a build where the more damage that she took, the more HP that she got. So it was like, don't shoot the Orisa, literally stop. Everybody stopped shooting the Orisa, and we won. So it was kind of fun, you know, oh, hey, we actually beat the raid boss, right? But there's definitely some moments where you're gonna like, oh, this feels really frustrating. And honestly, every game has those. Just let's not pretend that unbalanced fun is always going to be fun. Balance is balance for a reason. There's good and bad about having a balanced game. And while I don't think Stadium should be a balanced game, you're just going to have to live with whatever it chooses to be, which is oftentimes very silly. Pivoting off of that, I do think this game will get solved eventually, inevitably, at the highest ranks. In the meantime, enjoy it for what it is. I think they're going to continue to move and mix up things as it is. And Aaron Keller with the playtest on Thursday also talked about how, you know, solving things can be fun, but honestly, just playing the same build over and over can be fun too, and I definitely concur. So it will get solved at the highest ranks. If you aren't the highest ranks, so you don't need to worry about that. Play the game as you'd like to, and don't sweat it. Tanks sometimes do seem straight up unkillable. It's a big complaint of 5v5, maybe something for a longer conversation, but in the meantime, in this mode, tanks are definitely raid bosses, and a lot of their powers seem to scale better than a lot of the damage and support characters, which can feel a little bit annoying, let's put it that way. Off of that timely point, certain hero inclusions feel really annoying. It makes sense to have Mercy, Kiriko, Genji, Reinhardt, even if they come with a lot of baggage of infinite sustain. I think Mercy, Kiriko feel a little bit awkward in this mode, especially Mercy. It feels like infinite sustain, but you know what? They're popular characters. They deserve to be included. People are going to want to play the mode because they're there. But why are Moira Orisa included? Now, I know why the answer is. It's because their pick rate is really high. But to have Moira Orisa included in the first iteration of this game mode is a choice, I will say, and I'm going to say this respectfully as I can. I think the reason why they are chosen is because of the pick rate driven feedback. But the problem is why do people pick Moira Orisa? It's probably because either A, they feel like that's a character that is more up their speed, everything else is too hard, which is just not really necessarily true. And number two, Moira Orisa are often swapped to as solutions, not necessarily picked because I want to play the character. And so I wish that they had taken a look with the pick rate stats about what heroes are picked first, bronze, silver, and gold, and then chosen characters as a result from that. As it is now, Moira's not terrible. She could definitely feel a little bit annoying, but Orisa is the worst and definitely compromises a lot of tank engagement. Even if you go quote unquote Zarya, we counterpick, you're not going to be able to kill her. So that just goes completely out the window. So unfortunately, I don't think like the pick rate driven feedback was necessarily the best call here with the first iteration of Stadium, and may compromise people's enjoyment of this game mode. That being said, it doesn't really matter, I guess, in the long run, because all heroes will be included eventually. I just hope the next iteration of heroes aren't focused on pick rates based off of people thinking that they swap to because they have to, and pick rates because people want to actually play the characters. And off of that Orisa note, you can definitely lean into like infinite survivability builds. As we talked about it, it's not just something for tanks. A lot of heroes have a lot of infinite survivability builds, which can feel a little bit frustrating. Stuff just doesn't die very easily, so kind of keep that in mind. And not all powers for all heroes deal with counterpicks well. In theory, that their powers should allow you to counterpick, oh, I'm being counterpicked by this, so I do this, but not all heroes have the capability of doing that really, really well. Sometimes those perks just shore up powers that they already have, strengths that they already have, and so if you pick the wrong character, you might kind of just be screwed. I've also heard and experienced that not all heroes' power scale and ability design works out super well. For example, I play a little bit of Reaper, and a lot of her perks just don't feel that viable in this game mode at all. Having a weaker, shorter Death Blossom after Teleport as a hero perk seems just honestly straight up useless as after like round 2. A lot of his perks also focused on Teleport, and a lot of other people's perks focused on ultimates, things that you only get once per round. Honestly, it was fine, it was still fun, but I think that there could be a lot of heroes that honestly feel pretty bad as they scale up towards late game. And this is the final point here, and my last criticism is just more of a warning for the development team. The game design of Stadium is going to demand a content stream, I don't think a content trickle. Now, I did say earlier that it is fun to play the same build over and over again, but eventually you're going to want to try something new. Eventually you're going to want to play something that feels a little bit quote unquote honest, and you're going to need something new, flashy, exciting, or mysterious to get you back into playing this mode. At least that's my early impression. Maybe my biases are coming into play here. In general though, I think this game mode is going to need to have more of a Rivals-esque content output, more so than the base game, because the competitive integrity of that fundamental core isn't there as much. It's relying more off of the fun and flash, and it's going to need to continue to provide those. Overall, I hope this game mode succeeds. I'm not just invested in Overwatch success because that's part of my career, but also because I do think it's an interesting take on something that I haven't really seen before. I've never really seen a first-person shooter do something quite this silly before, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. Overall, I know that I definitely missed some details here. I've only play tested this for a couple of days. I just want to give you guys basic insight of things that you need to know before you play Stadium so that you can hopefully make your onboarding process a little bit easier. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.